So who wants to start telling
Where do we start?
I'll
Where'd
answer
you
that.
come from? Yeah.
Let Paul start, I mean.
Why?
Would you put what today's date is? When
and
did
the
you
first
start?
We'll get all that.
Okay.
Is a
Who's going to ask the
words.
questions?
I will. You just have to answer.
just 3 words.
Which 3 words?
Who are we? Right?
Who are you?
See?
All right, well, you start there.
Yeah. Well, I know who
As-
I am,
Okay, well, tell us who you were.
and I think I know who you are.
After 63 years. We hope.
Yeah.
We had our 63rd anniversary in August, and we've had a pretty happy life. It's been interesting, and we've had many experiences that we all otherwise, singly we would not have had.
Where did you grow up, Charlotte?
Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And
It's Thorpe's hometown.
And are you from there as well?
Me, Pennsylvania. After the year from 2nd grade on, I'm a Buckeye, not a Buckeye, but a Keystoner. See.
but we're from opposite parts of the state. I'm from the southeastern section, and he's from, it's more than northwest, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did your families come to be in Pennsylvania?
Well, mine was getting out of the South. Now, hers was different from mine.
Tell me about yours.
Well, I think hers is just as interesting, more so now. My father, well, I'll put it first. My parents, I should say, died at an early age, preschool age. I lost both parents. Cause, I think the part of my mother, the physician called it a tumor. And I have thought about it many, many times since then. You go back and check. And what at that time was called a tumor, now it's probably cancer. Because it's tumor of the stomach and that sort of thing. She died in September, and 2 months later, he died September, October, November, he died. See? And there were 2 of us. Originally, there were 3 siblings is what I'm talking about. Who's going to rear his children? That is my father. What happened was that that sort of thing seldom exists today. It exists. He died because of what I call grief. He cut out on his eating, his association, and there's an old song which says, "Old rocking chair's got him." And that's where he died. He died right in the rocking chair on the porch. Now,
What were their names?
what was his name?
Yes, the names.
His name was Alexander. See, and my mother's name was Texana. See, that was sort of, history is sort of broken on the part of my parents, and particularly after the death of my parents.
You never knew your grandparents?
Oh, that I wouldn't have been here if it hadn't been for his mother, my grandmother. See,
What was her name?
her name was Ann. See, her name
Ann
was
Smith.
yeah. See,
And she raised you?
Annie Smith, they called her.
she did what I would call a real good job, And she did it in the mode, M-O-D-E, that I would say fits into what is recommended in this day and age.
How many brothers, how many grandsons did she rear?
How many?
Grandsons.
I never had any grandsons.
How many grandsons did Mrs. Annie Smith?
Huh? Oh, you mean that?
Grandmother.
Oh, grandmother. Well, what happened is that once we left Alabama, Winona is an Indian name, an iron ore region on the area called Red Mountain. Mr. Smith, in a sense, followed my grandmother from Alabama to Pennsylvania. He was a miner in Alabama. It was iron ore. In Pennsylvania, it was bituminous. It was soft coal. See, there. He followed her there. But at that time, it was later, because when we arrived in Pennsylvania, it was I call a half uncle, because he was my grandmother's son. That she knew more about than what I did, what we did, or what I and my young brother. There were three of us originally in Alexander's family. One died as a result of eagerness of a young kid with a Christmas toy. You wound it up and, run on the floor, and zoom. You run it, and the living room was, you wouldn't believe it, but from where that screen is back there to where we are here, that was a big living room. That's the biggest thing in the house, see. And it was wintertime. It was around the month of December, and that thing ran into the fire. Didn't make any difference. He was going to get his toy, and he just ran right in.
The fireplace, they had an open fireplace.
Yeah, open fireplace like that. And you didn't have the medical works, drugs, salve, and all that to save him, and facilities, so he died. And that left a younger brother that was like you see on TV, the toddling more, that sort of thing. So it was just the two of us. In fact, there was 6 years between the older brother and the youngest brother, and then there was one in between named James. See, now we were living in Birmingham when that occurred. Birmingham and Bessemer probably attracted labor from the farms, the South, and everywhere else. And because originally, I remember a lumber camp, see, Flatwoods, see, Alabama, Wilcox County there. And I often make the statement, I remember the sawdust before I remember my parents, because I like to play in the sawdust. And, I felt so good, and, that sort of thing. They're on their back. The family moved from the lumber camp to Birmingham.
And lumber camp was at Flatwoods or Winona?
Flatwoods is a lumber region. Just the name, you could recognize that. Mm-hmm. It's a lumber region. And he worked in his steel mill. I mean, yeah.
Steel
and then later, he picked up on some books that dealt with electricity and connected with extraction, or rather hauling the cars from the ore mine in to the tipple dumped on the railroad. I don't know why he got that, but I can always remember that.
And this was Mr. Smith, or this was?
No, this is Mr. Alexander, my father, McStallworth, and he got a job. Well,
When was that?
this was this. I must have been about 4 years old when he got it. And this iron ore region, it was the Tennessee Coal Iron Railroad Company that owned it. But this particular area where they were mining iron ore was a part of so-called, quote, Red Mountain that extended clear across areas from here. This particular section of mining was called Winona, after an Indian, and he got this job. It was an Indian job, white and black, but I guess from his mother, my grandmother, he had the right sort of an attitude and rearing, because she wanted him to be a preacher. See, and I can remember him reading these books to take care of his job, and then going to reading the Bible and that sort of thing later. See, but because, well, you know, he had the economic outlook, that sort of thing. But he was also the sort of person that conducted himself so there were no problems with regard to work, either with the big boss or his compatriots. See, Mr. Owens, no, let me see now. Yeah, that was the name of the superintendent. But told him that as long, you know, as he lived, he was superintendent. He'd have a job. And when my parents died, because of the nature of the relationship between the superintendent and my father, he told my grandmother she could live in this house as long as he was superintendent. See, I've often thought about that later. Who's going to be the, who's going to be the breadwinner and all that sort of thing.
And who was?
The breadwinner. When you're shocked by the passing of your parents, you soon grow up. You don't remain the child. I mean, you start thinking, what's going to happen to you, that sort of thing. That's it. See.
Do you attribute your commitment to education
to my grandmother and to a lady in Monongahela who was a
School teacher.
A student of Carter G. Woodson, and Carter G. Woodson is reputed to be, and I think he is, the founder of Negro history in the USA. Harvard man, by the way. Now, this is way before my time, see there, and he left a fortune. His fortune, reading and writing, he left a fortune to that effort of Negro history, and it went down, and it's oscillated, went down, and it's come back. It's coming back now. But anyway,
Right at that point, there were many teachers from New England who went to the South, to teach in schools there.
And when are we talking about? What period of time?
Well, I'm 94,
that
so
was before the Civil War.
Oh, wait a minute now, Charlotte. Oh,
These teachers.
they didn't go before.
Teachers.
They didn't go before the Civil War, unless they were white missionaries or that sort of thing.
That's what I'm talking about. People, women who were teachers who went from New England to the South to teach.
Yeah, they did, and they
More after the Civil War.
Well, Tennessee Coal Iron had what you might call a more progressive look than some of their competitors. So at that time, see, that was it. But I'll get you into Pennsylvania. What happened is that her half, son, I put my half uncle is the way I would put it, decided that from what he'd heard and others, he was going to get out of the South because he didn't like some of the things, and he was going where he'd get a job. So he ended up in Pennsylvania, and he ended up in Monongahela. So with the death of my parents, and you have this big family session, there's no expression, who's going to bail the cat? See, and in this case, who's going to take care of these kids? You got 2 kids, see, and there was the discussion. I'm a small kid, and I'm taking that to, this is going to be my mother's group. Are they going to take us over? Or is it going to be this group who's going to take us over?
Fathers.
I'm telling you, when you have a tragedy or something like that, you shouldn't underestimate kids. They start thinking fast. I'll tell you another incident that occurred as a result of that funeral that had stuck with me almost all my life. Anyway, this was right after the death of my parents. My grandmother said to her counterpart, which would have been the grandmother on the mother's side, no, these kids aren't going to be separated. Rear them together. If you want to help us, you take them and rear them. If you don't do it, then I'm going to do it. Now, there was a difference there because this thing, and I've never said this bothered me. I mean, it's fine because my mother's mother was married to a preacher, and he was making a living. I mean, even though this was down in what you would call the cotton and lumber area, he was making a living. And, well, I can see them in those big hats and all that sort of thing then, see? As I look back and reflect, she was more socially bent of working with groups, with elder groups than being bothered with children, is the way I look at it. And when my grandmother made that statement, and she says, well, if that's the way you think about it, you can have them. And that meant fathers not hauling, seeing that the iron ore is pulled out of the mines now, and yet we're going back and live at this place where the first house in a row of coal of iron ore workers' home, and went, oh my, it was like a small village. The first house. It had water. It had outside that toilet. It was outside toilet, that sort of thing. See, it had 4 big rooms and a porch. In this outside, and a yard. They had that mining company had a yard where you grow vegetables and everything, and that's what my grandmother, she had. Boy, I'll never forget it because she made a gardener out of me, that sort of thing. Now, Uncle Bill,
vegetables for the family.
Uncle Bill told them, first chance you get, to my grandmother, first chance you get, you leave that place and you come to where I am, and we'll see what we can do about rearing her.
Now, did he help support you financially?
Yes, but he was, I will put it this way, he was henpecked. And my brother and I, we caught some, pardon the expression, what I'd say, treatment which was not conducive to good family life or rearing a kid. Because when my grandmother went back south to get more of the things which she had left, I ran away with my brother from the way his wife.
Let us get straight now where you were when this running away took place.
Well, I was in Monongahela.
In Pennsylvania.
Yeah,
then.
yeah,
See,
yeah.
that grandmother had taken them to Pennsylvania, where her son was living and working.
And we left at night. I've got an outline of this. The Episcopal lady's trying to, and I've got to get on the job and do it.
How old were you at that point?
Well, I wasn't old enough to know better, but I was old enough to know that wherever grandmother went or whatever she was doing, you stick with grandmother.
So you tried to follow her.
Wasn't a case of trying to follow her. It was, I had nothing else to do, and I was going to follow her anyway. See, I mean, I mean, you're preschool age. What do you mean, as I followed her? See, that's it. Yeah, that's it. See, yeah.
So you were like 5 years old at that point.
Pardon?
You were like 5 years old or 6 years old.
He wasn't in school yet.
Yeah, no. When I tried to go to school when I was 5 years old at that time, and my father and mother were living. I was 5 and a half, and I got 5 and a half to 6 in the register for school. I was a runt, and the darn fools wouldn't want to take me. And it made me sore, see? And I was determined, if I ever got in school, I would show them, you know, it was that sort of thing.
You sure did.
Well, that was because of grandmother. But my family, my attitude towards family, yes.
A small child.
Yeah, my family attitude with regard to life, I'll never forget the funeral part. And it's a habit, a social habit in the South and other places now. When someone dies, everybody in the neighborhood and everything cook food and everything, and they bring food there. Now, these cottages had porches built, and they were built just high enough, you know, front or the back, just high enough kids to play on them. You don't know anything about it. You don't either. But there's such a thing as the doodleberg. See, yeah. Well, when kids
What was that?
It's bug, a doodleberg. It's in the earth, and we used to try to find them. You get a stick and you turn it around like that, and the sound of the rhythm or something will make that bug come up to the earth where it is. And we used to play under there, the kids. Well, at this period of time, they were talking about the funeral, that sort of thing. And boy, kids play, and they got ears cocked too, see? And mine was cocked. I'm gonna cut this off more. Mine was cocked. And they take food over to my place, but the fact that they spoke, I use the term now, despairingly of the attitude of my dad, they turned me off. And if my grandmother were living, she would tell you that I didn't eat one bit of food that those people brought over because they made the comment, he thought he was too good to sleep with me. He wouldn't do this, so he wouldn't get that sort of thing, see? And they're supposed to be my friends, or our friends, they're taking food over, and yet here's this little runt down under the porch, under the porch is playing, listening to what's going on. So they began to make a man out of me right away. I wouldn't eat any food that they brought over. I went out and I gathered nuts. I gathered wild dandelions. I gathered everything. I would run errands for people and make money, buy sardines, and do that. And yeah, I'm not school age, honey. They wouldn't even let me in school. So I wouldn't do it. My grandmother, she shook her head. She at me, you know, you're this little kid like that. And I didn't, and we took off. That's
Mind of
okay.
his own has always been a part of him.
Yeah.
You want to take a little break and let
Yeah, I'm
your wife
gonna take a
talk
break.
for a few minutes? That's
Yeah.
excuse
Yeah,
me.
because here's you know.
We'll come back
I
to
do
you.
the yak, but she's
We'll
got
come
the
back to you. No,
That's
that's
a-
great.
We've gotten him to Pennsylvania now
Yeah.
from the
Come
south.
back. We'll be back to Pennsylvania.
Daddy, how old were you when you went to Pennsylvania?
Huh? Oh, when we left, I was in first grade. And they wouldn't let me start when I was 5, like they let a lot of us. I had just reached 6, but to look at me, I didn't appear to be. I didn't appear to be 6 years of age. My size. See, yeah.
So, Mrs. McStallworth.
But what I want to know is,
Let's clear up a couple of
What do you wanna know,
questions.
yeah, after you got to Pennsylvania,
What,
when you got to Pennsylvania,
Yes, let him continue to talk because
okay, you were
We'll get-
6,
some of this
and you took your brother
yeah.
to go find your grandma. Is that it?
After when we got to Pennsylvania,
when Grandma left.
my half uncle, his mother, my grandmother, she didn't tolerate laziness,
Yeah.
discipline. So he had worked in a period of about 2.5 years or 3 years, where he had bought his home and it was all half paid for, and he'd been made a good impression with the banker.
Now, let's tell about what he was doing. He was
a coal miner.
He was in the coal
He
mining.
was coal mining. Monongahela didn't tolerate industrial activities in the town except a paper mill and a glass port, a glass manufacturer, and on the other side of the river, a machine shop. No industry. They always thought that industry brought in bad element. That was an attitude, brought in bad element.
Yeah, there were many foreigners brought in. I mean, there were a large number of Polish people because he had some neighbors who were Polish people. And I later met one of the families who was, that was very nice to Paul.
At the end of World War I, because I was in World War II, at the end of World War I, Monongahela City, Pennsylvania, was a fully integrated in town with respect to education. The records will show that. That isn't what McStallworth say. That's working. So I left black school in Winona, Alabama, and hit integrated school in Monongahela, Pennsylvania. Catholic, any foreign element, Greeks, they had the school, but they were, integrated because there were blacks. I know blacks went to Catholic because the Catholic Church was right next to the black church. See, near there.
What was that like for you?
What was that like for me?
To go from an all-black school to now going.
Well, you're a growing kid. Anytime you're a growing kid and you're about 6 and a half, you don't evaluate what's this good for you. Kids are kids and they're playing. They don't have the snares and hangs up that the adults have had for hundreds of thousands of years. They're growing up. They want to play and they want to get along and that sort of thing.
So
and the founding fathers supported that by saying that you didn't get a bad element coming into the town. See, they decided, well, okay, we'll fix a park, we'll fix swimming pool, on the river.
met them.
See?
They were to work.
That sort of thing. Yeah.
So did that continue
Catlins
throughout your
Barbershop.
schooling,
Mr.
that you
Catlins
went to integrated
Barbershop.
schools, or was that just at the beginning?
That was the beginning, and it's never stopped. See?
Yeah.
That's
Well,
it.
Addie, how
See?
did you meet the
Sir?
Catlins?
Huh?
How did you meet? Who were the Catlins?
Who?
The
Oh, the Catlins were.
We had relatives that are
It's
Catholic.
another family, Catlin.
Yeah.
Catlin.
Catlins.
Oh, this is Kay. That's interesting. Fred has, we have a whole section of his family who are the Catlins, but it's Katlin.
Well, we lived at 615 Geary Street, and Geary Street came up from 6th Street up for about 8 houses, and then an alley went through, West Alley, and they lived at the second house from the alley on that. And Catlin, George S. Catlin, was a barber, and he eventually became,
How
What'd I
was the
say?
relationship
Huh?
to you?
huh?
How did you meet? What was the relationship with you and the Catlins?
Oh, the relationship.
How did you meet them?
Well, they lived next door for one thing.
Okay.
And the other thing is that that house where I lived was what my uncle bought. He lived there, so he owned it. He was a minor. He owned this house before George S. Catlin owned his. See, the barber, and this sort of thing. They were friends. Only Bill Watson, that was the name of my uncle. He was Baptist, and George Watson, George S. Catlin was Methodist, see, and the barber was much high tone, accepted in the city than, Watson, but they got along because George, if you were okay and you kept your nose clean, that was the attitude of George, and that was the attitude of my grandmother. No trouble, they got along. And when my grandmother died, my uncle worked down at a brickyard, another place, before then. I didn't mind working, and I worked in these barber shops, see, shining shoes. I should have learned to cut hair, but I didn't do that sort of thing, see. And because I was studious, it wasn't a matter of being, what do I want to call it, Einstein IQ thing. It was a matter of the fact, damn, he got an A, if he get an A, I get an A too. See, that sort of thing. And if you have people who push you, there were people, George's friend, who were contractors. Now you see that, they helped build that town. And they were mulattoes, Indians, black, that sort of thing. But they were all friends. They helped build that town. They built the park in there. They built homes that are still standing there and that sort of thing. But the wife was a product of I mentioned a moment ago, who was head of the history department. She was a student of his. And she married a contractor. The contractor's name was Simmons. And these contractors, when they built homes for themselves, they built some goodness. And they had a basement, man, that was almost a recreational thing, because she invited any child in the neighborhood, didn't make any difference white or black, if they had trouble with the lessons, to come in, she'd help. Well, she had 2 girls and 2 boys, and much younger. And there were times when she would ask me, who was older, to babysit and take care of these kids. So when I was in school, they always wanted to know how I was getting along. And my point was that it was easily recognizable. Whoever got an A or B or D, they were smart kids. And my point was, well, I can be a smart kid too then, smart meaning intelligent, get your lesson, that sort of thing. you want to mix with this, so, and it might, so my white friends would take her, and I like the Lynn girl of a doctor there. The kid was smart, wasn't no doubt about it, see. She get her lessons and get out of the way. Well, she get her lessons within maybe about an hour. It would take me about an hour and a half, see. But we all got A's, we got B, you know, that sort of thing. So it was that situation. And she pushed the blacks, and I was one. But you live in a town where the attitude is that there's going to be in the industry in this town. What sort of jobs are black high school people going to get? See, that sort of thing, you have that. So you're always pushing. The attitude was pushing, and this is true with white too. Get your lessons and get on to something else, get a college and go on from there.
How did you afford to go to college?
How did I afford to go? I got my A's, honey.
No, to pay for college. How were you able to pay for college? I just know because my parents had to go out and get jobs.
Right.
They wanted to go to college.
Well,
but they had to bring in money.
that's one of the ways. You got the scholarships. They had them back there then. Listen, I came out of high school in '29, and there was a minor given a scholarship for smart kids as well. But I mean, if you were smart, the A's, that sort of thing. But it didn't make it Finley is his name, and there's a place in Pennsylvania called Finleyville. He was a big coal operator. Well, people who operate these scholarships and that sort, they don't always treat black rights, but black doesn't know it. And let's see, Miss Greene came out of high school, lived in Finleyville, went to high school in Monongahela. Valedictorian, well, people who operate them, they're on the spot. They can't, you know, they're supposed to be fair and square. They couldn't give it to a white unless they were darn sure that everything was on the level, see? So she got one. It was some time before another person got one, and I was that other person. But that was a long time. Art Thomas got one because the town loved him. He was the town's athlete. He was Mr. Derrick, so far as the town is concerned, white or black, but he was good. His father and relative was in the contracting group among the blacks. So he got one. He got to Geneva.
About you.
Huh?
We want to know about you.
Did Mr.
How
Catlin
you-
help you to get college?
Well,
He helped him to get.
Yeah, George S. Catlin helped me get a Finley scholarship to Geneva College.
And let him tell about that scholarship. It was a community scholarship
Yeah.
for his fees, but he
Yeah.
also had to work on campus to earn, you know, other funds.
Yeah,
He worked as a janitor on the campus of Geneva College.
At the gym, my friends who ate at the boarding, I mean the cafeteria board, who looked out for their friend who took care of the gym.
And he had scholarship aid, but he had to.
Then I worked down at the Broadhead Hotel, and still there in Beaver Falls, as a dishwasher and salad man. Boy, I learned to make salad. I can make salad as good as you do. Rest and learn to cook and all that sort of stuff.
Not something you forget, huh?
No, you don't forget that. Especially if you have a grandmother like I had. You didn't forget that. Yeah.
And he worked in the gardens in the summer because she canned a lot of food.
Oh, this,
And had the
yeah.
big gardens.
Depression, I hope you get this in. In the Depression, Paul and Love, my younger brother was named Lovelace. Nobody called him Lovelace, anything. They called him Love. Now, you talk about a youngster that had the brains, didn't always use them unless his brother was pushing him. See, that sort of thing. Well, he was an athlete par excellence. See?
Tell her what happened to Love.
Yeah. See? Yeah.
He's in high school now. His brother is in high school.
Yeah. And he was, if you know anything about organization of athletics in the region, WPIL is Western Pennsylvania in the scholastic situation. He was on that geographical regional team when he was a junior and had been a contender when he was sophomore. I don't know.
In what sport? Oh, in basketball.
In basketball and track. I don't know where he picked up on this, but the things that the Harlem Globetrotters that you see doing now, my younger brother in the 30s, I came out of high school in 29, he was at 30, 31, he was doing that stuff then, take a basketball and do it like that, and go up his arm, and all around his shoulder, and he catches it in this hand, and then...
Was he a big fella?
Yeah, he was tall. Now that's something else too, that's boy, and I've become interested in this matter of gene. Now my dad was tall, but he was, to me, he was tall in a normal sense, because he didn't go 6 feet. That and then I don't think he went any more than about 5'9", 5'10". See, but somewhere along the line, I guess my grandmother gave him a lot of greens. And
How tall was Love?
He was 6 feet. He was 6
Which
feet.
in those days was very tall, right?
Yeah, which in those days was very tall. Yeah, see, but
I know my mom played basketball in high school, and she was 5'4", and she was taller than anybody.
Yeah, see,
5'4".
yeah,
I know the small girls came through when I was coming.
yeah, yeah, yeah. He was.
5:35.
Okay, so we need to switch over.
Yeah,
There's a little bit of the game that you've missed. Is that okay? Not
a
okay.
little bit of what?
The game. It's
Yeah, yeah.
And there's
And we've always been interested in the games, even when we were hungry.
Should we stop now so you can watch some of the game, or should we go on?
Good place to start.
My preference is that
Then you get the game.
we can go over. Yeah, we can pick this up later.
That's a deal.
Yeah.
That would be great. Are you interested in the game too?
Are you hosting? Are they hosting? So you know, sometimes the host determines
I think you
which way you go.
I think you determine everything. That's how this works.
Because there's so much.
What'd you say?
I said there's a lot that I've learned, and there's so much I'd like to know, but gotta keep moving it on. You know. But anyway, I know
We'll have to
everybody
do
is.
some writing.
Well, we've been talking about this writing thing. I think it's good that Fred was willing to tape. Plus, you need to take that tape recorder. You need to use the tape recorder.
Yeah.
And just
Well, we like to hear her
tell
part.
stories.
See, like,
Yeah, but
Yes.
both of you have
Yeah.
stories.
The stories are amazing.
That-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
we
wonderful.
want
We
to
have-
know. I didn't even know the name of this half uncle.
you didn't know the name of what?
Your half uncle.
Watson.
I never
What was
knew
his
all
first
that.
Oh, yeah, William.
What
Bill.
was his-
Evidently,
William Watson.
see,
Yeah, but
I didn't get into that side of it.
You know.
See, now, and you should I didn't get into that side of it when the lady said, "You take them." So I keep telling you, little kids, boy, they learn.
I know
When you
how
say,
you
"You
feel
take
about
them," see,
Two grandmothers. What was
Is
so
it-
interesting for us, I think, listening to this story, is a very similar thing happened. Fred was 7 when both his parents died in a car crash.
yeah,
And it was the same thing. The family got together to try to figure out, there were
Yeah.
3 children,
yeah,
16, 13, and 7.
yeah,
And initially, there was an uncle who wanted to separate them and have
Yeah.
one go here. And the 16-year-old who was in the hospital because she was in the car and she survived the accident. And from her hospital bed, she said, absolutely no way. My brothers and I will stay together. Whoever we go with, we have to stay together. So, you know, when you say from the mouths of babes, you know.
Yeah.
And all the adults were so stricken with grief, they couldn't think straight. But when she said that, they said, okay. And then it was decided that Fred's mother's parents would move into their house so the kids could stay in the same house and have at least some continuity. Mm-hmm. And then the grandparents, who were immigrants themselves, moved in and took care of the three children. She got married in just a few years later, the oldest. And but he from age 7.
Yeah, I would say that's the reason my grandmother married. Let me see. I think he go with Lee Smith, coal mine. See.
But it does have a big impact on children.
And
a lifetime impact, as you were just saying.
Huh?
I said when you lose your parents, you know, at a very young age,
yeah,
it has a lifetime impact. Like
oh, definitely, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But you feel that experience, but mostly your grandmother's influence, is what made you so committed to continue to achieve.
Well, it was the grandmother's influence was there before, as always, a youngster. See, when I left Alabama, that was first grade. When I reached and started school, then in fact it was near school time. I was in second grade. In fact, they wanted to determine, you know, what I'm going to be. So I was second grade, and my education, as far as I'm concerned, went from second grade, Monongahela City schools, all the way up to being granted the PhD in December at OSU with the whole family there, this one and that one and the other, and the chairman of the history department, who was Swift Regatz. He wasn't much taller than my wife yet. Took his quote star pupil and family to the faculty club for dinner, and they didn't usually do that. See, that's up at OSU. So
since Paul has jumped to the 1954, I would say that when Paul graduated from Ohio State University, you know, received his PhD, and didn't want to go that day because that was the day of her first grade Christmas party. And she didn't want to go for anything to go to see him get a degree. Meant nothing to her. She wanted to stay for her Christmas party in first grade.
Now, see,
have you forgiven her?
She didn't tell me that.
What year was that?
1954.
1954. She didn't tell me that. And I busted my butt going to Lazarus, seeing the man there getting you clothes that come off the top floor that was moved down there. He tell me before he tell anyone else. And I'd take my grandmother, and they won't know back then in Wilberforce then. How are you doing all that? How are you doing all that?
She was mad as she
And that's the first time she's told me.
Remember that, so don't get upset with me now.
Well, I'm not. I'm telling you now.
I had to work with Ann a long time.
Yeah, that's the first.
That's an easy job.
That's first.
Ann told me a story earlier. Should I not bring up the story you told me earlier today?
Which one?
Up in the Sudan, in Khartoum.
If they remember.
Do you remember Ann going off in Khartoum when you were there in the Sudan? When you told her not to leave the house, and she went out anyway for a walk, just looking for what she could find and see. Do you remember this story?
I don't, but so much.
You remember I don't know who the people were. Remember when we were in Khartoum?
Yes, and we were there when the Congo blew up, and when we were in the airport in Khartoum, people were coming in with their clothes in bundles, like they had taken pillowcases off of their bed, put things in, or wrapped their things in sheets and tied them in bundles and brought them in. And little kids crying, of course.
But I was trying to,
But I remember,
Joanne, that there were some people that you had to talk with or meet that lived in this big house, and everybody in the area lived behind these tall walls. You know, it's like in a compound. And I remember clearly when we had to get out, and, you know, it was hot, hot, hot. And this house was behind these gates, and this big, you know, the tall concrete walls, white concrete walls. And you all were going somewhere with the people that lived in the house. And you said, just stay in the house, you know, we'll be back shortly, watch Carol. And I just went out.
Do you remember the Sands in that's American Black Family out of the...
In essence, what I was trying to say is, well, as we traveled, Daddy's thing was, if you're going to go out, when we would go to the hotels, that we were to meet and have dinner together, wherever we were. Do you recall that?
Yeah.
And, you know, just going
Two places always shook me up.
People in Turkey and
even though, and that was the Sudan and Hawaii.
That what?
Hawaii.
Hawaii.
When I was in service, that was before I went to Sudan. But it was. I've always been faced with the problem of color and race. You know, I mean, try to figure it out. I saw people in the Sudan with blue eyes or with gray eyes, and difference between me or you, see, your hair is straight and they would have straight hair, and here's me, I'm like this, see, and I go to Hawaii, they had sort of, well, I don't know what color eyes, and I look at them, but to me, there was so much sadness in their eyes. Of course, this is wartime. You see, the women, I never saw it any place else different. That sort of thing. Color different and all that. And then, even after the war, other reading books, and speaking about the lady, you know, made so much a record in Africa, that's so racist. And she used to say, we all come from the same stock. And the old saying is now, there's only, what is it? 99, that's 1/10 between your gene and my gene now, see? That sort of thing.
People are people.
Yeah, people are people. Well, I always took the point of view from my grandmother and from Miss Perry Simmons that people were people, and what happened is just the way they were treated, the way you reacted. I never will forget her. She assumed that I should have graduated valedictorian of the high school, and that sister went over there. She had 4 children, and she came with the board, and the principal, Howard Crane, and said, when my kids come through, I'm not going to have this. You can be sure. We'll get every Simmons and McPherson, people in this time, and we will. See, she didn't have it. Her oldest daughter, living in Pittsburgh now, was a valedictorian of the class. Her youngest child,
PhD too.
yeah, her youngest daughter was a valedictorian of the class. See, well, let's see, where was I? I was 4th. And of course, Simmons didn't know the story that I knew, and I never told her. because it was a situation. I think the board and the principal took it out on me because half the football team didn't really have the proper grades to be playing football.
It's still the case.
And I'm playing football. I'm the lowest man. You're supposed to. The teacher said, leave your paper on your desk so you get it. And I took the French exam, and every damn football player passed. Yeah, every one of them passed. But I didn't. I only followed what she said. See, but I knew what happened, and a lot of them knew what happened.
They all copied your answers.
Yeah.
Did you pass?
Did I pass? Oh, wasn't any doubt about my pass.
Oh, the question is why he wasn't valedictorian when he should have been.
The question was why I wasn't valedictorian. And the other question was, if you played a good game, and that was your best game, the next week you were supposed to be the captain of the team. And Chester Wine, he never had the courage or intestinal fortitude to follow that principle 100%. Because the next before the last game, didn't anybody play any rougher, tougher. And I should have never been playing football. I mean, there's a broken finger from it, here's a broken nose from it. I used to be proud of my nose. Oh, that's something.
You were better off in the library?
Oh, that was heaven.
That's where you wanted to be?
That was heaven. And then in college, that was heaven because I had the keys to the kingdom. You know, teachers assign homework in college, and they put see that the books go on reserve. And you got most of the time you got to catch those books during the daytime, and they only let so many out at night. Well, I worked in the library, and brother, any book that had my work in it, every student didn't get all the books because I'm gonna have one for my assignment. See, when the library opened the next morning, that book was on the shelf because the janitor had to clean up.
That's great. Now, I don't want you to miss too much of the game, so maybe we should put the game on.
Yeah.
Although I'm so into your...
Where's your wife?
She's on the way back. She just called. She's on the way.
Okay.
She'll be back here. She said any
I could have said, where's my daughter, but I don't say that anymore.
Well,
now.
Thank you. That was very kind. That was very kind of you. Is that because we're in my house? Now, if we're in your house, it would have been, where's my daughter?
You and Bob look just alike.
You think?
Yeah, a little bit.
Yeah.
Yes,
I don't see
you
it,
do.
but everyone says it, so I just take their word
Yes.
for it. Do you think we look alike, Fred?
They do look alike.
Nope.
But
everyone says so.
But I knew Bob earlier. He looks more like you do now. His face was thinner. But I can still see the resemblance between the two of your eyes.
And when you see pictures of my mom, I don't know if you've seen any pictures of her. This is where the line comes
She
from.
has.
And one of my sons looks like us too,
How
but not the
interesting.
other one.
I saw a picture of your mother and your dad. Bob looks more like the picture I saw of his dad.
That's the 60-foot
And
Babson
I
graduation,
saw a side view of his mother,
I think.
and I didn't see the face view.
Did you ask him about his brother, his kid brother?
What happened to Love? I don't know that we know what happened to Love.
He was playing basketball against, I think it was McKeesport. You've heard of McKeesport. It was a rough game going on. He got upset and he slid along the basketball floor on his left side. He got a floor burn. And I took him to the room for, to take care of it. And mercurochrome, I guess. No iodine. I guess I don't know how long it's been on the shelf, that sort of thing. It lost its potency in effect. And eventually it turned into, let me see, what did they call it then?
Gangrene.
Gangrene?
Huh?
Gangrene?
No, blood poisoning. But I must think what the name they called it back then, though there was a name.
Oh, so he died from
He
that?
died from the floor.
Huh?
He died from the blood poisoning.
Yeah, he died from the blood
In high
poisoning.
school.
Died from the blood
What a
poisoning.
shame.
Yeah. And
He was in high school at the time?
yeah, he was in high school. He never graduated. When he died, and the records will show this, when he died, there was no school that day.
That on now.
Yeah, no school that day, and flags were half-mast there.
He was supposedly, I remember
Yeah.
you and Carol telling me he was a terrific ball player.
I'm trying to think of what the name they call that when, what's it?
Turn the radio on for a while, then we'll come back.
Another name for blood poisoning, but that's what it was.
Put a time frame on this.
Sir?
Ask them what game we're watching.
Oh, what game? Now, I know you want to watch
World-
something on
Oh,
television. Tell us what
it's
this
a
is.
World Series thing.
Which year? Just so we have it on the tape.
Oh, this is the world, the present
What
world.
year
No,
what-
what year is this now?
What-
Who's playing in the World Series? You
Well,
want
with Series 9, this was the game for 2004.
and
yeah.
who's playing?
And did I take you to the one when we had on our honeymoon? Was it that? No, it was a game between Boston and New York with the DiMaggio's.
And now you get to see Boston and St. Louis, right?
Yeah.
What year did can you remember the year in which your brother died?
Well, see, I graduated.
So early 30s, right?
Oh yeah. I graduated 29 with 31.
Okay, and what year? Okay, I'm gonna look this up, Daddy, on the computer. I'm gonna see what influences me.